So life would be boring if all we did was model parts all day. Why don't we look at creating an assembly? When I try to put together assemblies in SOLIDWORKS, I try to put them together like I would do in real life. Pins go into holes. We'll call that concentric. Faces matching up, that would be coincident. We want to line these two parts up in the middle, that'll be a width mate. Maybe we want the phone stand to be a certain distance from the side of the table. That's a distance mate. Mates are the relationships that we create here at the assembly level to put things together, just like we added relationships back at the sketch level. So why don't we put this assembly together with the table, phone, and phone stand parts and see how they go together. Just like how we start a part can be a little important, putting an assembly together is the same way. The first part that we add to an assembly is special. So why don't we start a new assembly? We can click on the new icon up on the main toolbar and we'll start an assembly. Well, the first thing that we probably do in an assembly is add new components. So there's actually an option for that tool to automatically start when we start an assembly. We're going to browse out to the Finished Files folder. Don't open the finished table assembly, that would be cheating. But why don't we pick the table? That seems like it would be the first part in our assembly. When we hit open, it's going to come in and let us place this table anywhere where we want to. But let's do something a little bit different. We need to think about where we want to place this. If we come over and just hit the green check mark, it will automatically lock the table in place. So assuming that the table was initially modeled in the correct orientation, then it will come into the assembly like it would in real life. If we hit the green check mark, the table will align the planes, the front, the top, and the right planes of the table to the front and top and right planes of the assembly. And the table will be fixed in place. We can tell that by the letter F in front of the name of the part. Now, if we want to orient this part differently, we've got the ability to right-click on the part and float it. Then you'll be able to move it around and change the orientation. We're going to leave this table where it is. So let's bring in the outer part of the phone stand. Use Insert Components, and we can come over and choose the outer component. Hit Open, and then we can come in and just kind of drop it into place in space. Now, notice the minus sign in front of the part name. This tells us this part is able to be moved around. There's a move and a rotate icon on the assembly toolbar. We'll use those later. We don't actually need to use them right now. We can actually do a lot with our mouse. If I scroll in and zoom in, if I click on the part with the left mouse button, I can move the part. If I right click and drag the part around, I can orient the part a little bit differently. So I'm going to orient it kind of like this so that we can kind of see the bottom of the part and the top of the table. We're going to add what are called mates to lock down the movements of our parts. I usually like to, mate things up like I would do in real life. Mates that put the parts together like the real world scenarios. We want to come in though and start the mate tool up. This blue box is going to allow us to select different things, and we can pick one of the faces on the bottom of our outer part and then the top of the table. The default solution here is a coincident mate. Hit the green check mark and say OK to that. The next thing we might want to do is distance this part from the side of the table. So here we'll pick the side of our part and the side of our table. Now the default here again is coincident. We can actually come over and change this over to a distance mate and type in a value. Let's say 5 inches. And we can say OK. So right now, the only thing that this part can do is move front to back. So even while we're in the mate tool, instead of clicking on a face, we're going to click and drag it with the left mouse button, and I can move this part front to back. We don't have a really good face here on the front of the part to do this next mate, so I'm going to come in and maybe choose that edge. So that edge to that face, we don't want coincident this time. We'll go back to a distance mate, and we'll say maybe another 5 inches. So typically I'll add faces to our mate tool. Sometimes it's useful to use an edge. So right now, if we look at the feature manager tree, the minus sign in front of the outer part is gone. That means that this part is fully located. Okay. Let's go in and add another component. We can use insert components, and we'll bring in the inner part. We can kind of drop it into place right about there. You move it up so we can see it. Okay, so just like in real life, how do we put these parts together? Let's do this a little bit differently. Last time we came over and we started the mate tool. Let's do this from the graphics area. If I click on this face and I hold down the control key, I can also pick one of the faces for one of the holes in our outer cover. The choice there by default is a concentric mate. And then that lets this part just kind of slide around and move around. The next thing we want to do is we want to center these parts in the middle there. So how do we do that? There's a really nice mate that we can use to do this. It's called the width mate. Let's do that same operation where we control selected a bunch of faces, but we're going to pick 4 faces this time. So I'm going to pick this outer face, hold down the control key, and select this outer face. Now, I've got to let go of the control key while I use my middle mouse button to rotate around. Now I'm going to hold down the control key again and pick this outer face and this outer face. Now once I let go of the control key, my little pop-up window will show up here, and my choice is the width mate. What that's going to do is going to center up the 2 outer faces of the inner part in between the 2 outer faces of the outer part. Now the only thing that this part is able to do is rotate around. Now I can run right through the table if it wants, but we'll play with that here in a little bit. Okay. From here, if we actually do use the move tool, there are some fun things that we can do with the move tool. Right now we're in standard drag. That's just like what we would have if we come in and use the left mouse button. We can move the part around. But we can come in and use this collision detection. We can check for clearance or collision between different components, stop at collision. So if we come in and grab this outer part here, oh, it must have already been interfering. Let's see what happens. So that just turns off the stop at collision. We can see the pins highlighting and the faces when it actually comes down and hits the table, and it highlights when it hits the pin here to stop it. So right there, they're really close, the way we've modeled this, to line up just right. So how do we get it where this part is directly touching the table? Let's add another mate. Maybe the top of the table, and then this fillet, we're going to control select that fillet, and our option here is tangent. So that'll make it where that part is nice and tangent there, and there is our part. Let's add another part. If we go insert components in that same folder I've given you, it's an older phone, it's an iPhone 12. And come in and place it somewhere on our assembly. So we've got a couple of choices here as far as how we put this together. Typically I like to get it in an orientation where I can see both of the faces. And I'm going to select this face, hold down the control key, and select this face. and I'll make those maybe coincident, so that means they're touching. So this guy's able to move side to side and up and down. So how do we center this on our stand? Well, we can use that width mate again. If I pick this face and this outer face, control select, and I rotate around, I hold down the control key again, this face and this face. Again, once I let go of the control key, my choice is a width mate. And that's going to come in and center that phone up right in the middle. So now the only thing it does is it slides up and down. Now there's a slight angle here between these two faces. It's not quite perpendicular. So what we can do is we can come in and zoom in a little bit, maybe take an edge on our phone right there, hold down the control key, select one of these faces, and we'll make that coincident. If we tried to come in and make that, not use the edge, but actually use the face, we would have had a little bit of a problem. Because, like I said, there's a slight difference in angle there on those two guys. It would have given us an error message when we tried to add that mate. So just like I said, we're going to come in and we're going to add mates, kind of like what we would do in real life, kind of mimic how the parts are going to go together and see how we can put this assembly together.